Hello everyone, and welcome back to our second in our short video series on Microsoft 365 and Azure and the security offerings therein. In this video, we're going to be covering off the Microsoft Zero Trust framework, and we'll be looking to explain what Zero Trust is, why it's important, and also how it can actually be applied to Microsoft 365 and Azure respectively. Now, the first question normally on people's minds is, what exactly is Zero Trust? Well, put it simply, Zero Trust is a security model that assumes breach at all times. So rather than just assuming that everything behind a company firewall or corporate firewall is safe, a Zero Trust model actually assumes breach is going to happen and verifies each request as if it originated from an uncontrolled network. So it's based on three guiding principles, which are verify explicitly, use least privileged access, and then assume breach. Adam, do you want to walk us through what these principles are?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Sam, and hello, everybody. Yeah, so the first pillar, verify explicitly, means that every access and request should be authenticated and authorized based on all available data points, such as the user's identity, their location, device health, service or workload, data classification, or even other anomalies in the access data that are slightly different than normal. Basically, in this pillar, you want to verify who is accessing your data and then go from there. The next pillar, being used least privileged access, means that users' access should be limited with just-in-time and just-enough access policies, risk-based adaptive policies, and data protection mechanisms. This will help secure both data and the productivity of your organisation. What this means is that identities will be afforded the minimum access requirements that they need to do their job and nothing more. And the final pillar, assuming breach, means that the security posture should be designed to minimise the blast and radius and segment access, verify end-to-end encryption, and use analytics to get visibility, drive threat detection, and improve defences. So, as Sam covered, regardless of where the data originates or what resources it accesses, the Zero Trust model teaches us to never trust and always verify.
All true. And so I suppose with these guiding principles in mind, why is Zero Trust important? That's normally the second question we get. Well, organizations face many security challenges in the modern environment, such as the increasing complexity and diversity of a digital estate, which can include not just people, but also devices, applications, data, and infrastructure components, which can be found both on-premise and in cloud. There's also the rising sophistication and frequency of cyber attacks, which exploit the vulnerabilities and gaps in traditional perimeter-based security models that rely on implicit trust. And the evolving compliance and regulatory landscape out there, actually, which requires organizations to protect, manage, and govern their data in a seamless and consistent manner. So, three important points. Now, Zero Trust helps organizations to address these challenges by providing a proactive, integrated, and adaptive approach to security. So we've now learned what Zero Trust actually is, but now we'll look at the foundational elements of what Zero Trust is in Microsoft 365 and Azure. Adam, do you want to take us through this? Take it away.
Awesome, thank you, Sam. So Microsoft 365 and Azure are built with many security capabilities that help organizations to implement a Zero Trust policy across 6 foundational elements. These 6 elements are identities, data, endpoints, applications, network, and infrastructure. Let's look at what they entail in a little bit more detail. Starting with identities, this applies to people, services, or IoT devices. When identities attempt to access a resource, Microsoft will verify with strong authentication to ensure access is compliant and typical for that identity of what it would normally expect. In layman's terms, Microsoft services can be configured so that they will authenticate each user with access to a resource to make sure that, for one, they are compliant, and for two, that the level of access they have or are requesting isn't outside of the norm for what would be expected for that user.
That's right, and then I suppose the second point is securing endpoints. So once an identity has actually been granted access to a resource, data can flow to various endpoints. So this could be ranging from IoT devices and smartphones all the way to cloud-hosted servers and many, many more. Now, there's a lot of potential endpoints, which means there's a large area to cover. This is commonly referred to as an attack surface area. So Zero Trust mentality actually means that apps, devices are securely provisioned and configured and kept up to date, more importantly, that the data that it has access to is restricted as fast as possible in the event of a breach, and that the security access policy is enforced prior to access. So in other words, Zero Trust secures all the different devices and endpoints. When an attacker takes place, It limits the access when a breach occurs, and then it makes sure that all the access control policies for each user that has access to the resources is enforced beforehand.
Awesome. So moving on to applications. Applications and APIs provide the interface by which data is consumed, whether that's legacy on-premise, lifted and shifted to cloud workloads, or even into modern SaaS applications. Zero Trust applies controls and technologies to discover shadow IT, ensuring that appropriate in-app permissions, limits access based on real-time analytics, monitors for abnormal behaviour, controlling user actions, and validates secure configuration options.
Yep, absolutely right. And you can also secure data as well with Zero Trust. Ultimately, protecting data is what it all comes down to. And that's what security procedures and teams are working to do. So where possible, data should remain safe even after it leaves the device, the app, the infrastructure and networks that your organization controls. Now, Microsoft actually provides services such as Microsoft Purview, for example, to allow organizations to classify, to label, and provide data loss prevention and risk management, as well as encryption to data. That way, even when it leaves your organization, the protections that were in place there, whilst it was on your infrastructure, will remain in place once it's left.
Networks are equally important, as all data is ultimately accessed over network infrastructure, but it is hard now to know where the network boundaries are. You can put in place network controls to enhance visibility and help protect attackers from moving laterally across the network. The start of improving this is to do network segmentation, which is known as the security at depth principle. This allows a business to deploy real-time threat protection, end-to-end encryption, monitoring, and analytics to provide further visibility and protection.
Absolutely right. And finally, we actually have infrastructure, which whether it's on-prem servers, cloud-based virtual machines, containers, microservices, they all actually represent critical threat. So Zero Trust makes it easier for you to assess your versions, perform configuration management, deploy just in time and just enough access to harden the defenses that you have. You can also detect attacks and anomalies and automatically block and flag risky behavior and take proactive actions. How does the application of Zero Trust work for both Microsoft 365 and Azure? Well, for Azure, users can apply Zero Trust principles to their infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service workloads, as well as their hybrid and multi-cloud environments through several security services. So these services can include Microsoft Entra, Sentinel, Azure Security Center, Defender, Azure Firewall, and Azure Key Vault to help protect your certificates, secrets, and keys. This ultimately helps you to protect the networks, the compute, storage, and identity resources that you use in Azure. So there's quite a lot of coverage there. As an example of how this might work, well, Microsoft Entra lets users apply conditional access to enforce granular and dynamic access policies based on user, device, or even location and risk factors. Now, some of these features may be requiring extra licensing. So, for example, the geo-conditional access would require an extra license such as a premium P2 license. Also, you could look at things like users making use of Azure Security Center and Defender to help monitor and protect their cloud resources from threat. Now, this could be partnered with Azure Sentinel to collect and analyze the security data from multiple different sources and actually then automate a response for remediation. Now, Adam, I'll hand over to you at this point to cover off what it looks like from Microsoft 365.
Thank you, Sam. So for Microsoft 365, users can apply Zero Trust to their identities, services, data and applications, as you'd expect. This can be achieved through Microsoft 365's suite of security and compliance capabilities. So these services have different applications. For example, Microsoft 365 Defender can be used to detect and respond to advanced threats across endpoints, email, identities and cloud applications, while Microsoft Information Protection can also be used to classify and protect sensitive data across devices, apps and cloud services. Finally, we also have Microsoft Compliance Manager, which can be used to assess and manage compliance posture across M365 and all cloud services as well. Microsoft 365 applies Zero Trust to protect users, devices and applications and data across the cloud and on-premise solutions. Some of the technologies being used will be Microsoft Entra, Microsoft Endpoint Manager, Microsoft Defender for Office 365 and Microsoft Cloud App Security to verify identity, enforce policies, encryption data and monitor activity. So, to wrap up, Zero Trust is a security model that assumes breach will occur, but helps to prevent it by suggesting that we don't trust in any entity, whether inside or outside of the network. It can be applied to different aspects of the digital estate, such as identity, devices, data, applications, networks, and even infrastructure. And it can be applied across the whole of M365 and Azure solutions. So there you have it. That's the Zero Trust framework.
So it's until next time, it's goodbye.